Hello, and good morning, everybody. How beautiful is Washington? I am just in awe of this place entirely. Over the past few days, I've visited a waterfall, the ocean 3 times, and a mountain range I do not remember the name of. Plus, on my way to the grocery store, I have an unadulterated view of Mount Rainier. I mean, it's just on all 360 degrees around you. I can't wait to actually visit that mountain and just take in its intensity. I'm also excited to have my family and friends who haven't been out here come experience this just wonderment as well. And there are dogs. So many dogs. I saw 3 huskies this morning just grabbing a coffee. The more I wander around this area, the more it makes sense that killers of all kinds are drawn to the remoteness of the Pacific Northwest. This is why in the 1980s, when 4 young couples went missing in 3 neighboring counties, it would be years before they'd all be found. But even more confusing is who killed them. This is the story of the Tube Sock Killer. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from a Medium.com article by Yasmin Scherer, a Front Page Detectives article by Michael East, a Sandhill Express article, Wikipedia, and the rest I will put down below. Of course. Although you have most likely heard the story in one format or another, I believe it bears repeating, especially since we don't have all the answers. On August 10th, 1985, Stephen Harkins, who was 27, and his girlfriend Ruth Cooper, who was 42, left their home in Tacoma, Washington for a weekend getaway at Tule Lake, T-U-L-E, a ways east of Mount Rainier. Tule Lake is a not-so-secluded camping destination when it comes to the Pacific Northwest, known by locals for its fishing. It wasn't as if they had headed directly into the mountains away from any civilization. However, when the pair failed to show up at work the following Monday, both families filed missing persons reports. Only 4 days after the two initially left, on August 14th, a hiker passing through the forests of Pierce County stumbled across a man still in his sleeping bag and a gunshot wound to the head. Police quickly determined this man to be Stephen, and were positive he'd been murdered while asleep. Only meters away, investigators found Stephen and Ruth's dog, who had sadly been shot to death as well. A widespread search was immediately underway, and over 2 months later, quote, on October 26th, a skull was found at the dead end of 8th Avenue South near Harts Lake, about 1.5 miles or 2.5 kilometers from where Stephen's body was found, and dental records would confirm this skull belonged to Cooper. 2 days later, on October 28th, her body and her purse were also recovered from the area. A tube sock had been tied around Cooper's neck. According to the autopsy, Cooper had died of, quote, homicidal violence, though a spokesman would later say she had died of a gunshot wound to the abdomen. I'm sorry, I have a question. Was the tube sock still tied around her head neck, or was it around her body neck? I'm not sure that makes much of a difference, but I'm curious. After the discovery of Ruth's remains, police had a strange feeling that this case could be connected to another. Let me take you back to spring. On March 9th of 1985, Edward Smith and Kimberly Levine, a couple from Kent in the Seattle-Tacoma area, decided to take I-90 into Grant County for, again, a brief weekend camping trip. Grant County is yet another beautiful area of Washington, but it isn't what I think of when I think of the state. I drove through parts of it on the way out here, and it is such a different, gorgeous environment. I don't know, it almost feels Utah-esque in a way. Forgive me if I'm completely wrong on that. It was a long drive. Anywho, that's where Ed and Kimberly headed off to. According to Front Page Detectives, what horror transpired that night or the next wouldn't be known for some years, but it certainly ended in murder. The following day, Smith's body was found in a gravel pit close to the Wanapum Dam. His hands were tied behind his back and his throat slit. He was missing his wallet and ID, and it wouldn't be until later that police managed to identify Edward, only after his employer raised the alarm that he was missing. A major search was then launched to find Levine, and 2 weeks afterward, the couple's vehicle was found abandoned 10 miles away from where Smith's body was discovered. At the scene, a fingerprint was recovered, but still no sign of the missing woman. It took until August before Levine was found, the same month that Cooper and Harkins were killed. Levine's body was found in a sagebrush only 2 miles from her fiancé and skeletonized through exposure and predators. According to my Google Map research, the Wanapum Dam area is roughly 3.5 hours from Tooele Lake, separated by Mount Rainier. So it'd be east of Tooele Lake. Although police didn't have any definitive evidence to link these double murders, the similarities in the abduction and separation of his victims were enough to make investigators think twice. And while they were actively investigating these cases, another couple disappeared in 1985. On December 12th, 36-year-old roofer Mike Reamer, his 21-year-old girlfriend Diana Robertson, and their 2-year-old daughter traveled to Pierce County from their home in Tacoma. Pierce County is just north of Tooele Lake, and like the first two couples, this decision would prove fatal. According to the Medium.com article, the couple met each other 4 years prior when she was 17 and he was 32. Mike had been in the animal trapping industry for several years, but mainly earned his income as a roofer. However, not everything was as great as it seemed between these two. In October of 1985, 2 months before they would vanish, Mike was charged with domestic assault. Diana alleged that he kicked in her apartment door, threw her to the floor, and rubbed her face against the carpet. She had visible marks all over her face from the attack, and the case was temporarily settled with a restraining order in place, which Mike and Diana would go on to ignore in order to reconcile by December. Now, that last bit of information makes their case and these other cases that much more complicated. These three headed out to the LeGrand area of the Nisqually River for a weekend of camping, and so Mike could check on his animal traps. LeGrand, for your information, only happens to be 20 miles from Tooele Lake. Just for your reference, they're all mildly close together. That very night, December 12th, quote, Kmart employees in Tacoma reported a little child to police that was wandering around the grounds without any parent. The child turned out to be 2-year-old Crystal Louise Robertson, the daughter of Mike and Diana. Crystal was brought to her grandmother, but it became clear that the girl must have witnessed horrible scenes. When officials asked Crystal where her mother was, all she answered was that, quote, Mommy was in the trees. Ugh. Police said that the communication with the girl was difficult and couldn't get a feasible statement from her. You know, because she was 2. Investigators immediately started a widespread search for Crystal's parents in the area that they said they were headed, and Mike owned a nifty red car, and investigators were hoping it would be easy to spot amongst the dense green forest. However, it wouldn't be so easy. Months went by without movement in Mike and Diane's case, or Ed and Kimberly's case, or Stephen and Ruth's case. And on February 18th, 1986, almost a year after the first murders, and 2 months since the most recent disappearance, a man walking his dog south of Elbe, E-L-B-E, came across a decomposed body of a woman half covered in snow. She was identified as Diana Robertson. Again, just so you know, Elbe is only 27 miles from Tooele Lake. Is it getting any more strange? I don't know. A later autopsy revealed Diana was stabbed 17 times, and just like with Stephen and Ruth, had a tube sock tied around her neck. Here's where it gets even weirder. Quote, close to Diana's body was the couple's Plymouth truck, which provided some convenient evidence for the case. Bloodstains were found on the seat of the car, as well as Mike's winter coat, which is unlikely that he would have left behind. Police also found a manila envelope inside the truck with, quote, "I love you, Diana," written on it. Diana's mother identified the writing as Mike's, but an FBI expert stated that the handwriting analysis was inconclusive and couldn't confirm that it was Mike who wrote those words. However, for many months, Mike Reamer remained the main suspect in the murder. My first thought, after, Mike did it, of course, was maybe he wrote that letter under duress. That's why the mother knew it as his, but the FBI was like, I don't know, dude. But the police at least had a theory for this murder and disappearance. They believed it was most likely that Mike killed his girlfriend, left their kid in town, and dipped. Newspapers and other media outlets would build on this theory when his domestic violence charges against Diana were released. And, due to the tube sock connection, many people speculated he had something to do with Stephen and Ruth's murders too. For years, this would continue to be the most popular theory, and the longer people waited, the more that they believed Mike was the killer. I mean, where was he? His girlfriend was murdered, his kid just appears in town, and he's nowhere to be seen? It makes sense. While it doesn't hold as many common characteristics, a familiar fourth double murder occurred the next year in November of 1987, this time on the north side of Seattle. Quote, Jay Cook, who was 20, and Tanya Van Kuilenborg, who was 18, traveled from Canada to purchase parts for Cook's father's business. Last seen boarding the ferry in Bremerton, Tanya's body would be found in a ditch near Alger on November 24th. She had been bound, raped, and shot in the head. Her wallet and keys were found thrown away at a Greyhound bus station. Police initially suspected Jay Cook was responsible for the killing until his body was found nearly 60 miles away from where Tanya had been discovered. He was beaten and strangled, end quote. These 8 murders of young couples in one area essentially over 2 years shook the state of Washington. No matter how many detectives they dedicated to the case, it would simply take time to see progress. And at the time, Washington was new to all of this. I mean, the Night Stalker was the talk of the town, but nothing like this had ever happened in Tacoma or really Seattle. This area had yet to blow up in terms of serial killers. Okay, fast forward 2 years, and police solved the first of 4 deadly cases. In 1989, quote, police solved the Smith and Levine case when they positively linked the fingerprint found on their vehicle to a truck driver by the name of Billy Ray Ballard Jr. Ballard was arrested a few months after the killings for the abduction, torture, and rape of 2 women in Wyoming, and his fingerprints finally proved a match, end quote. Billy Ballard Jr. immediately confessed and even pleaded guilty to the crime, but he stopped there. If he had killed anyone else, police would have to find out the hard way. Okay, now we have to fast forward 20 plus years. In 2011, investigators get their next big break. On March 26th, a set of hikers were wandering the forest only a mile from where Diana's body had been recovered when they came across a human skull. According to the Medium article, a more extensive search later revealed a jawbone without any teeth and rubber boots, whose role in the case is still unclear. Although the human remains were incomplete, experts were able to determine that they belonged to Mike Reamer. No cause of death could be established anymore, but a gunshot wound to the head could be ruled out. Instead of a prime suspect, police now believed he could have been killed by his girlfriend's killer. However, this discovery didn't rule him out completely. Quote, the recent discovery revived theories surrounding the tube sock killer. If there's one serial killer, then did they take the lives of 4 humans or more? Just over 30 years since those fateful killings, investigators and families received their second and possibly final answer. This comes from the Sandhill Express article. For more than 30 years, investigators in Washington state had been trying to solve the murders of 18-year-old Tanya and her 20-year-old boyfriend Jay. The killer's identity remained a mystery for investigators until DNA evidence found on Tanya's pants were uploaded to a DNA website, enabling genetic genealogist C.C. Moore to identify the likely suspect in just 2 hours. In April of 2018, C.C. Moore got on a computer and, out of the billions of people on Earth, identified through genetic genealogy the one man she believed killed Jay and Tanya: William Earl Talbot II. But, quote, to make an arrest, detectives needed to be sure that the DNA left at the crime scene by the man they knew as only Individual A matched William Talbot's. So somehow, they had to obtain a fresh DNA sample from this guy himself, end quote. Police learned that Talbot drove a semi-truck and began tailing him regularly, waiting for any opportunity. And one day, this guy stops his truck at a red light, cracks his door, and fucking litters, leaving a paper cup in the middle of the road. Detectives rushed this paper cup to forensics, and within days, they had their answer. The DNA from this cup and the DNA from the crime scene was a match. On May 18th of 2018, the Snohomish County Sheriff announced that William Earl Talbot II had been arrested for murder. And in June of 2019, he was found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and sentenced to 2 sentences of life imprisonment without parole. As amazing as this discovery is, Mr. William Earl didn't offer any other information. Maybe this was his only double murder, which would be ironic, or maybe he had killed more couples previously. But sadly, we may never know, because he's not talking. The murders of Edward and Kimberly and Stephen and Ruth still remain unsolved. And it just so happens that these 2 cases, oddly, were the same 2 where detectives found a tube sock tied around a woman's neck. Is this tube sock killer already behind bars, or is he an entirely separate serial killer, waiting to take his secrets to the grave? And that, my friends, is the story of the unsolved-ish tube sock killings. My theory, I don't know if I should say it. I think it was Hillary Rodham Clinton. She would have been in her late 20s, early 30s. She fits a profile. I could probably draw a profile of her. It makes sense. I hope you guys all enjoyed that story, gruesome and frustrating as it may be. If you'd like to stick around for an extra, more up-to-date true crime story, hang out after the music. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Alright, let's just get right on into this bit here. It is written by Liam Quinn of People.com. I won't spoil it. Quote, police officer Jennifer Thompson is still frustrated at how long it took Madalena Kohakari's parents to report their 11-year-old daughter missing. But Thompson, the deputy chief of the Cornelius, North Carolina Police Department, and the agency leading the search for Madalena, has not given up hope that the girl will be found. That's not just me being a mother who's hopeful, Thompson told People. I do believe that we will find her. Madalena was last seen in surveillance footage getting off a school bus on November 21st of 2022, days before her school went on Thanksgiving break. It would be another 3 weeks before police were finally notified of her disappearance, only after school officials confronted Madalena's mother, Diana Kohakari. Officer Thompson says, I don't want anybody to think that after 3 weeks the mom had this, okay, well, it's time moment, because she didn't. The mother, Diana, who's 39, and her husband, Christopher Palmiter, we're going to go with Palmiter, who is 62, and Madalena's stepfather, were both charged with failure to report a missing child. Christopher was convicted following a May 2024 trial, while Diana pleaded guilty that same month. After Diana was released from jail on time served, police officially named her a suspect in her daughter's disappearance, though she has not been charged with any further crimes. And the mystery of Madalena's whereabouts remains. It's not that there's this inactive case file sitting somewhere, Thompson says about the case. We talk about it every day. After Madalena was officially reported missing on December 15, 2022, Cornelius police, who have been assisted by the FBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, as well as volunteers, began an exhaustive search. Despite chasing hundreds of leads, searching several locations, including a local lake, and closely examining both Diana and Christopher Palmiter, police have uncovered no sign of Madalena. Search warrants reviewed by People state that after Madalena was reported missing, Diana told police that she had last seen her daughter on November 23rd, 2 days after she got off the bus, and a day before Christopher left their North Carolina home to drive to Michigan to pick up something from his family's home. Both Diana and Christopher have denied knowing where Madalena could be, and their decision not to report her missing right away obviously came as a surprise to the police. The search for Madalena has galvanized the community, both in Cornelius and online. The police department itself has held community gatherings to mark significant dates, including the anniversary of her disappearance and her 12th birthday. Questions are now being asked online about the current whereabouts of Diana. After she pleaded guilty to failing to report a missing child, which, what the fuck, Diana was released from jail on time served. And even though her Moldovan passport was surrendered to authorities during the initial investigation, a spokesperson for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement told People that the agency has a record of her leaving the country, although no further information on her location was provided. Thompson says after her release from jail, Diana traveled to the Moldovan embassy in Washington, D.C., where she was able to obtain a new passport, and since Diana has not been charged with any additional crimes, police were unable to prevent her from leaving the country. Palmiter, meanwhile, has begun settling back into his life in Cornelius. He was sentenced to 30 months of supervised probation, and he is back in the home he once shared with Madalena and Diana, and he has since filed for divorce. Levin Handsome, a 46-year-old neighbor in Cornelius who used to see Madalena walk by her house nearly every day, is holding out hope for her safe return. Quote, "It's a heart-wrenching reality," Handsome told People. "I wish Maddie would magically reappear." End quote. Diana, where did you put your daughter? You have to tell me. Why don't you care where your daughter is? That is all I have for you wonderful human beings today. Thank you all so much for listening, taking the time. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next week. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.